Vice President Kamala Harris spent the weekend shoring up support in some must-win battlegrounds, while former President Donald Trump held rallies where he cursed and made vulgar comments about sports legend Arnold Palmer. The AP notes that Donald Trump went on the attack after VP Harris raised questions about whether he was exhausted. He hit back, calling her a bad VP, but he didn't call her bad. He used a word that I get in trouble for when I say it on this show. Then on Sunday, the former president tried to troll Harris by making French fries at a Pennsylvania McDonald's. Our Garrett Haake has more.
Trump campaigned in battleground Pennsylvania.
If we win Pennsylvania, we win the whole damn thing, right?
But raising eyebrows with this lewd digression about Arnold Palmer, spending 12 minutes talking about the golf legend in his hometown of Latrobe.
When he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God, that's unbelievable. I had to say it.
Trump also holding a photo op at a Philly area McDonald's, working the drive-through window to pre-screened customers.
We love you. Come here, thank you very much.
And scooping out French fries.
You got the shoulder on it.
Saying he doesn't believe the vice president worked at McDonald's for a summer in college. Harris responding today.
Here to discuss, former Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota. She's the founder of One Country Project and CNBC contributor. And Mike Madrid is here, former political director of California's Republican Party. And he's the co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Heidi, let's start with you. Let's talk about VP Harris's new focus on whether Trump has the physical and mental ability to be president. What do you think about this?
Well, I think that anytime you're telling people or making a point that people already know, they've been watching him, they see he's exhausted, he dances to music as opposed to answering questions. He doesn't look like he's having much fun. In fact, the McDonald's thing actually made him look like he might have enjoyed that little campaign visit. Probably handing out Happy Meals made him happy. But I would tell you that she can see it, everyone can see it. And when you're arguing in politics, something that is obvious to everyone, I think that it's a good method of raising age without saying he's old.
It's obvious, but when President Biden was running, age was a huge focus before he dropped out, and the criticism never really stuck to Donald Trump. So, Mike, do you think voters are now starting to pay attention and realize that, holy cow, that age concern we had for Joe Biden, we should be having it for Donald Trump as well?
Well, look, I think that's certainly the case with the very small handful of undecided voters that are going to determine the outcome of the election. I've never seen a campaign close with such an absurd final message here, trying to convince people that you should be the next president of the United States. Rather, he's reminding everybody why they fired him in the first place. I think one of the challenges with Donald Trump is his behavior is so erratic, you don't know whether he's going into mental decline or not because the difference is so immeasurable. Is this age-related decline, or is this just his continued lunacy that's driving forward and going off the cliff that we've been watching as a country for the past 8 to 10 years? It's getting harder and harder to determine, but what we do know is he's not getting better. He's getting far, far worse.
Heidi, Donald Trump may have had a good time at McDonald's, but I want to know, what was the point of that campaign stop? Because this trolling about Kamala Harris, she didn't work there, she cleared this up for us 3 weeks ago. Watch this. I just want to ask you yes or no. At any point in your life, have you served 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, working at a McDonald's? Yes or no? That's it.
I have. Part of the reason I even talk about having worked at McDonald's is because there are people who work at McDonald's in our country who are trying to raise a family. I worked there as a student. I was a kid who worked there trying to raise families and pay rent on that.
She wants to talk about this because the policies she's putting forward are serving all Americans. It's part of the care economy plan. Why exactly does Donald Trump want to do this? I mean, he was asked about raising the minimum wage, and he dodged the question because he doesn't want to. So who exactly is he doing this for?
Well, he's doing it for himself. The same reason he does everything that he does. He is not going to let her have the McDonald's voting block, because God knows nobody has eaten more McDonald's in the White House than Donald Trump. And I mean, and if you're looking for kind of that moment where you look like a man that can relate to people, he's looking out the window, he's visiting. It actually wasn't a bad photo op for him if you ignored the fact that he did this to try and troll her, instead of just saying, look, you know, I want to connect with people that I don't connect with ordinarily. And so I don't think it was a bad hit for him. I think it didn't wash the crude comments that he made over the weekend. And people, I mean, he's got to persuade more women to vote for him. And nothing that he did over this past weekend would encourage more women to vote for him or have people believe that he's got a temperament that we would like to see back in the White House. And that really is, I think, the damage that he does every time he steps to a podium. He's better at a fryer than he is at the podium.
Well, let's talk about different voting blocks, because Rolling Stone has new reporting that Donald Trump's stance on defending Ukraine could actually cost him the election. When I read that, I immediately thought about the Polish communities in Pennsylvania. What do you think about this, Mike?
Yeah, I've written extensively on this. The targeting that the Harris campaign is doing specifically on this issue is really, really important. The Polish community, perhaps more than any, is keenly aware of what the history and legacy of that region of the world is like. And for Donald Trump to basically be opening the door and rolling out the welcome mat for the Russians, a historically aggressive nation in that part of the world, who's knocked on the door of Poland many, many times over the course of the past century and a half, if not longer, is recent memory to these folks. There are plenty of Polish people who've lost relatives to Russian soldiers. So I think that's a unique message that works specifically with a very large target audience in Pennsylvania. And I think it absolutely could be one of the decisive factors in a race that's going to be so, so close.
Heidi, you mentioned women voters. Obviously, abortion is a top issue. Should VP Harris make that her closing argument?
Absolutely. I think that one of the reasons why you see non-college educated white women moving to Harris is because of reproductive rights. It won the midterms for the Democratic Party. It is still her best closing argument to bring home those suburban women voters. And so, you know, she's got to stay with it, because Donald Trump, quite honestly, and the Republican Party, not only is she winning the day on this issue, they don't have a response that holds any water with women.